Anyway, so I got the job, and I had just bought this car. It was a I can't even remember now. I can't remember. It was kind of an older car. Well, yeah, it was a 1999. No, it was probably a 1990 something. But the day before, it was a Sunday. I was supposed to start the job on Monday morning, and I couldn't get my car started, so I had to call my brother, and he was like an hour away from where I lived at the time. And I said, Dave, you got to help me. I said, I got to start in the morning, and my car won't start. And I said, I don't want to lose this job before I even have it. He did not want to come. It was a Sunday. It was his day off. And he's like, all right, all right, all right, I'll be there. So he came out, and we went to the auto parts store, got some parts, and he's working on it, and the engine catches on fire. That's always fun. There's fire coming out of it. My brother's so funny. He's like a master. He was like a master mechanic. He just puts it out with a rag. He's like, it's just some gas that spilled over on the side there. It'll be all right. I would have freaked out. The car was gonna blow up. So he works on it for a while. We get it started. Everything's fine, and he helped me out. He's such a good brother, man. He was awesome. If I ever needed anything, there were 2 or 3 times in my life that he got me a job. I mean, literally. And now he's not around. It sucks. It really does. But he was there, man, and he helped me. And I remember I got my car started, and the next day I was able to get to work and ended up having that job for, well, 12 to 15 years. And yeah, it was interesting because I had the job for a long time, and I really liked it. I mean, it was great. I was making good money, and I had a lot of responsibility. And then I I quit because I was going to go into commercial truck driving, and while I was trying to do that, I ended up it was in the winter. It's the worst time standing outside in the winter cold trying to learn how to drive a semi, and I ended up getting bronchitis and got really sick during the school. So I had to kind of drop out of that. And I did a bunch of other jobs for a while. And then I decided that I was going to go back to corporate transit. And at that time, they had a whole nother, they were just getting ready to move a whole mailroom operation over to their facility. And he was looking for somebody. And so when I walked in that day to get a job, Alan, my boss he goes, you brought me a ringer because I was already there for like 10 years. He goes, you brought me a ringer. And then he hired me for that position. And I ended up with a supervisor role. I supervised the whole mail operation for I think it was 3 more years, and then I quit. Well, then the job ended, the project ended, and long story short, I ended up not working there anymore. But I don't want to get into my whole life story. But it was just interesting how those 2 times parallel right now. I'm in the same exact time of year and looking for a job again. All these, what, 10, 20 years later? I don't know, whatever. It's crazy. Life is funny. You just never understand sometimes why things happen the way they do, but then you look back and you see God's hand, even in times when you probably I know I wasn't as close to the Lord. I was still walking with him, but I wasn't as close to him then as I am now. There's no doubt I'm different, totally different now. And I know my experiences will be different now than they were then. But So anyway, he said he was going to call me about that job. I had to go through the background check thing, and then he was going to call me. So hopefully, I hear something tomorrow or next day or whatever. I would probably take the job at this point. It's not going to be my first one that I wanted, but at this point, I can't wait around. I got to get something coming in. Um, I've got some ideas of my own that I would like to try, um, but before I can do those things, I got to have a steady income. I can't have. It's a catch 22. You got to have money to make money. You know what I mean? Like I have some really good ideas for business. I have a business mind. I am a creative, you know, person. I have creative ideas. Some of my ideas I never got to do them, but other people had thought of them and did them and were very successful at those ideas that I had that I never did did anything with. But yeah, so I'm going to work on those things. But this job, I'll be home during the day, uh, a lot mostly, so I'll be able to still work on business ideas and things. Because if I once I get to the spring, I have an idea that I had 20 years ago. I don't know if I told you this or if I told Game Warrior. I don't know. But 20 years ago, I had a idea when I was one of the jobs I was doing with my brother, cleaning job that I had with him, and he knew a lot of people. Um, so I started washing cars, detailing. I've always enjoyed that work. I'm really good at detailing cars. For some reason, I don't know why. I guess because I've always liked keeping my own cars up. I mean, I'm not a professional or anything, but not bad. But anyway, he got me a few jobs where I was going to people's houses and I would, detail their cars inside and out. And I was making pretty good money, and I was going to start a business, a mobile car wash, because there just wasn't anything like that in Michigan. And I'd never even really heard of anybody doing it. And then I found out, like in California, places where it's hot all the time, probably Florida too, places like that, they do a lot of that um, business. So 20 years ago, I had the idea and I built a website on Wix. Never did anything with it because I ran into some what I thought were problems with the idea, so I just kind of tabled it. Fast forward a couple of weeks ago. Did I tell you this? Because I don't want to, rehash something I've already told you. Okay, it might have been when you were gone. Um, so anyway, I'm walking the dog, and it's a Saturday, and all of a sudden, this idea pops into my head. Wasn't even thinking about it. Just randomly popped into my head about starting this business. Well, now I can't because it's cold out. But it was like early November. So anyway, I decided to think about it more, and I got home and I'm working some things out on paper, thinking about how I would do it. I go to the store and I'm coming back to my neighborhood, and you're not going to believe this. I see a sign and it says mobile car wash in progress in my neighborhood. And I stopped and I said, "Come here." And the kid comes over, his name was Josh, and I said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "I had this idea 20 years ago." He goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Wow." And I said, "And today I just had the idea again." And I said I was going to consider doing it. He goes, "Oh, yeah, you definitely got to do it." And I was asking him questions about it. I said, "So what do? You have a water tank?" Or he goes, "No, you just hook up to their spigot. You have a power washer with you, and you just hook your hose up and go." I said, they don't care? He goes, no. All right, that solves a big problem that I had because, I thought I was going to have to get a huge water tank and a van and all this. He goes, no. He goes, you just do it. He goes, it's great. He goes, you only work 9 months out of the year. He gets off. He was still working in November, so you could still probably work most of November, and then you get December off. At Christmas, you're off through like March, and then you start again. And he was, he's telling me all this stuff, and then I was like, all right, this is too crazy to be a coincidence. I mean, what are the chances? There's probably maybe just him in the whole state. There's not a huge mobile car wash business in Michigan. I can tell you that right now. I even asked him, I said, do you have any competition? He goes, oh no. And I said, see, I'll be your only competition. Maybe you could just give me some of your customers and we'll call it even. No, but I mean, so I think in March I am going to do it. In fact, I went back and I found the website that I created 20 years ago. And it was so old that I had to update the editor in Wix. It automatically updated it. But the site I made was unbelievable. I don't believe I made that good of a site 20 years ago. It like had I didn't even have to change that much. I liked it so much. All I had to change was that there's options now where people can book when they want you to come and wash their car, and they can actually do it right on the site, which would be convenient because then I can schedule people ahead of time when they're going to be home, and that way I'm not wasting my time. And then whatever. But I'm going to come up with different packages. I mean, I got a whole thing, and it's quite lucrative business if I can do it. I can even hire somebody to help me and make more money. But anyway, I'm not about. I don't want you to think I'm just all about making money. I'm not. My heart is the ministry. But let's face it, a lot of ministers don't make enough money even when they're in the ministry. They got to work. Paul was a tent maker, so you have to do what you have to do. And right now, I have to do what I have to do. I was full time in the ministry, where I was actually when I was in the '90s and stuff. Before I took on that other job, I was an evangelist, traveled all over, and I was self sufficient in the ministry. I don't self sufficient, God sufficient, but I mean it was a full time thing. I didn't have to work another job, but a lot of pastors do. Most of small churches, unless you're in a pretty good sized church. Um, and then all through the '90s, I was full time in ministry. It wasn't until the early 2000s that I began to have to work. And then once I started Jesusconnect, that was in 2012, 13. But I've never taken donations really. It's never been about money for me anyway. But um, I know God is going to bless me. Um, I'm in a real place right now, but it's one of those reflective places. Like he even told me I was going to go through this. He said, I don't think the Lord puts anybody through anything for just because he's mean or something. That's not the way God doesn't do that. He's not going to make us suffer for no reason. There's something that he's doing, polishing us, making us more dependent on him. I mean, he did that in the disciples all the time. The tests that they went through, the ships twice, 2 times, I almost sank a ship. you know, all the times they didn't have food and they had to trust him. I mean, that was all test. I mean, sure, he can if he can multiply water into wine, he could have and fish in loaves. He could have fed them like that all the time. Why didn't he? Because he was testing them. He even said, "Oh, you have little faith." It was a constant thing with him. And we can think we have faith, until we get in the wilderness a little bit, and then all of a sudden that's when your faith is shaken. But even now, I'm like tonight. I was at first I was a little discouraged. I was kind of down tonight. Just different things and talking to my sister. I was a little bit down. Then I went outside and had a fire, and it was really nice because I haven't been able to have one in a few days because it's been rainy and crappy. But I cleaned the fire pit out today and I had a really good roaring fire going, and I was praying, and I just had this faith. I said, God, I know you're going to do something, and my faith was stronger, than it was, even a few minutes before that. And I think again, it's the Lord showing us that He's there, even when we don't think He's there, or even when we're struggling to know that He's there. He's there. He never leaves us. He didn't leave the disciples. And I think that's notable that He was asleep on the boat. He was on the boat. He was there, but He just wasn't. He wanted them to work it out that He was not going to let them drown. They were panicking. Well, they had a probably had a right to panic. The boat was about ready to capsize. But I think that's kind of the way we have to go through things sometimes. And then God shows us. And that's how we get stronger in our faith. It's crazy because you would think, you just one day you'll just get all this faith and have it the rest of your life. And that's not the way it works. I wish it was, but I think that's why He said daily, daily bread. We have to seek Him daily. We can't rest on yesterday's blessing or yesterday's miracle. It's interesting to me. One day you can be living high off the hog, and the next day it's feast or famine, and that's sometimes the way it is. And you have to be. Paul said, in whatever state I find myself in, and I think a lot of times I was reading Francis Asbury's journal, the great Methodist preacher, and he said that there were days when he didn't even eat. I mean, that's hard to believe. Here he is, a Methodist preacher. You would think the Methodist church would have taken care of him. But there were days he said I didn't even eat, and I'd go to a town, and the people would invite me in and feed me, and that's how he ate. I mean, I'm sure that he could find berries and things. There was woods and everywhere. I'm sure he was eating. There's rivers and brooks. I'm sure he was drinking, but not a good meal. You know what I mean? And not having a place to lay your head. You had a, I'm sure he had like a sleeping bag or some kind of a tent, all of his stuff. But he was riding a horse from place to place, and that's what he did. But so I think there were times when you know there were tough times. I remember when I was in service at Jimmy Swiggert's college there, and had a pastor come in, and he was talking about when he was young and as a child, and his parents. I think it might have been. I don't know how old he was. Was it the Depression, the Great Depression? Was he that old? Was he a child when that was going? It must have been. But he was talking about them not having any food, and his parents not being able to put any food on the table. And there were days when he said all they would have was a few cans of peas. And he remembered, that his mom would be outside putting the clothes up on the clothesline. She'd be praying and crying out to God, and then all of a sudden the father would come home and he'd have all this food, and it was like feast or famine. He was talking about that scripture where Paul said, endure hardship as a soldier." for Christ. And man, he got about that far in his sermon and just sat down. I think he was remembering how hard it was and just started sobbing. And when he started crying and praying and just right in the middle of his sermon, that's when the Holy Spirit came and it took over that whole chapel. It went all day, all night for 2 weeks, maybe three. They canceled classes. It was every second of the rest of that time was nothing but the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And it just started with him. I'll never forget it. Just sitting down with his hands in his face and weeping, and the Holy Spirit came and just, whew, you could feel it in the chapel. Everybody. I mean, it was like people were on their knees, people were on their faces, they were draped over the chairs, the seats, people were at the altar. It was something because I remember that Brother Janaway, he's the one that ordained me. Well, he didn't ordain me, God did, but he's the one that, well, he laid hands on me and gave me my license to preach. Brother Janaway was an old fashioned Pentecostal preacher. I remember news must have traveled all the way to Lafayette, Louisiana, because he was there that night, and it wasn't an announced service. It was the Holy Spirit, but he was there with an accordion, just up there playing that accordion and singing. And I remember looking up and seeing him, and I was like, "Where am I? What planet am I on?" Oh my gosh! And it was like all the people that were like the upper, you know, espionage of the Assemblies of God were there in that service that night. That word traveled, and it got to where it was people from all over that came into that. It was like Asbury College, is what it was like, but it was a smaller version of it, I guess. It was one of the two times that has happened when I was in college, and that was one of them. But yeah, it was great. But it's through suffering that we end up getting the greatest blessing. It's that paradox that we don't doesn't make any sense. But out of suffering, I've been reading George Mueller, his diary. He was a famous man of faith in the 1850s in England. He started an orphanage, started one orphanage. He had like 100 kids. And back then in England, it was very, they had a really bad, they had a crisis. That was when William Booth was preaching, the Salvation Army leader, founder. And the Thames River was polluted. It got so bad, it was polluted. And they said that mothers were, they didn't have good, even water to drink. That So they would give their babies bourbon, whiskey. Um, it was a terrible time. People died of starvation, and Mueller was in a place where he was trying to get money for the orphanage to pay for everything, and he would pray, and somebody would walk down the street and just give him money, or somebody would, he'd be praying, and while he was on his way to go somewhere, somebody would say, "I was just coming to your house, and I have bread and milk for you," and all this stuff. He just every cent, every dollar, everything that he needed came in through prayer. And he wrote about how faithful God was to him in meeting all of his needs. And it's just a really inspirational book. But he got to talking about God spoke to him to start a second orphanage, and he showed him where he wanted it. And so he went out and he talked to the man that owned the land, and the man said, he would think about it, and that night he had a dream. And in the dream, Jesus told him, "You better sell him that land, and you better sell it to him for half of what you were going to." So that morning, when Mueller went to see him, the man said, I'm going to sell it to you, don't worry, and I'm going to sell it to you for half." So he ended up getting this land for like an unbelievable price. And he built another orphanage, and he had eventually, I think he had over 1,000 children that he was taking care of. And he was like social media before social media. He was writing people correspondence, letters, and things. People from all over the world were giving him money. It's an amazing story. But it's just how he would go from feast to famine. One day he would be at the end, and he'd say, "God, there's just nothing left. There's no more money to feed the children. There's no more food. There's nothing." And he would be so discouraged. He'd be ready to quit, and all of a sudden, somebody would walk in and say, "This just came in the mail," and he'd have a letter, and there'd be all this money in it, and it would always be just enough to pay all the bills. It's just an amazing story. And if that doesn't inspire faith in you, I don't know what will, right? I mean, it's just so encouraging. And I'm so glad I found that book because I've really needed it. It's helped me. Because sometimes we can think we're the only one going through something like that, and then you remember what Peter said, don't think it strange when you go through the fiery trial. Because God tests all of us in some way or another. We might not be tested in the same manner, but we're going to be tested. I remember the story, it was a true story that one of them inspirational movies. I saw it last year. It was so awesome. This guy, he was living by himself, and he was a wood maker. He made things out of wood. But he's kind of a hermit, and nobody really talked to him, and people were kind of afraid of him. They heard that rumors about him that he killed somebody, and so nobody wanted to talk to him. He kind of lived by himself. The only people that he had any contact with was the people that um, would come to him occasionally to have something made. He would make things for people out of wood. Well, anyway, he ended up. There was a boy that started coming around seeing some of the things that he made. He got really interested in carving and wanting to learn how to do woodwork. And his mother, she, I forget, they were rich, wealthy, and her husband, something happened to him, and he died or something, and the money that was supposed to go to her to take care of her and her child went to somebody else. So she had to leave this mansion, and she ended up in this small town. And it's a true story. That's what was so remarkable about it. So she's in this little town, and there's a train that goes through the town. And there was this. Wait a second, I'm trying to remember. No, wait. I think I'm getting two different movies mixed up. Yeah, I'm getting two different movies mixed up because I've seen so many of them. A lot of them are alike. But anyway, she was married, but her husband was in the army, and he was gone for a long time, and she hadn't heard from him. But he was supposed to come back on the train, so they went to the train, and he wasn't there. And then she got the letter or notice that he was killed. So she was widowed, and that's right. So the boy was kind of enamored by the art, the craft of woodworking, and he wanted to learn how to do it. So the mother goes to him and says, "Would you teach him?" And he was like, "I really don't want to teach anyone, and kind of shut the door on her and was kind of rude. And so it was one of those situations where she was very persistent. So she came back, again. Would you please teach my son? It's all he talks about. He wants to. So he agrees to let him come over, and the whole thing was that she had a nativity scene that somehow got lost, or I don't know, ruined somehow, and she wanted a nativity scene. I believe I'm trying to remember if. Wait a second, I'm getting it mixed up again. I think the boy wanted to make a nativity scene for his mother. That's right, because she had lost the one she had. That's right. That's. I'm trying to remember exactly how it went. But anyway, so he starts teaching them how to make the figures, and they're working on the nativity scene. So they're making the baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the animals, and so he's working with the boys, teaching them how to do the craft. Well, in the process, the mother doesn't know what they're doing. She just knows he's there. They're kind of keeping it a secret from her, and so it's one of those things where at first he doesn't really know what he's doing, of course. So it's kind of like he's trying to be patient with him and teach him and all this stuff. Well, the long story short is that what you find out in the process of it is that his son and his wife were killed, died of something, fever or something, and so that's what drove him into being a hermit. And so seeing the boy, and he kind of grew fond of the mother, and so it's one of those stories where he ends up making the nativity scene, and then of course they give it to her, and she's like blown away how beautiful it was, and it was really cool. And then they end up, they end up getting married. It's a good movie. I mean, it's a really good movie. But come to find out, he was wealthy. He had all this money. He had this huge house, and at the end of the movie, it shows him in the house. He just moved out in the woods because he didn't want to be in that house anymore. It reminded him of his children and everything. So he ended up moving back in there, and they had this party, and they had all these people there. And the thing that was funny though is she made him a red sweater, which was kind of funny because he's like, "Well, all my sweaters that I had, none of them fit anymore." So he goes, "It's a good thing you made me a new one." But it was funny. But it was a good movie. But it kind of shows you how you can go from being so down, and then God can just raise you right back up. I mean, it's just amazing. And but yeah, we get inspired by things. I think that's the difference between a Christian. When a Christian has trouble, our faith can't grow if it's not tested. That's right. When a Christian has trouble, we have hope that the world doesn't have, and that's why the world needs Jesus, right? Because they don't have any hope. I mean, if you're not a Christian and you go through something, you have to go through it alone. Or you turn to drugs or alcohol or whatever to numb your pain. I heard Jim Carrey got saved. Did you hear about that? The actor Jim Carrey. he said that you saw that video too. Yeah, I had heard that he had gone through a lot of stuff in his life, and he was even suicidal. And it's funny to me how comedians like Robin Williams and that these guys that tell jokes for a living and they're constantly making other people laugh, but it's like this. It's like the the sad clown, commentary, right? The clown that amuses other people is secretly, you know, disturbed. That's why people are afraid of clowns. They're so disturbing. No, I'm just kidding. But that's a whole nother thing, right? Boy. But the tragic clown. What was that? There was a used to be an opera about a tragic clown. I had to do it. I had to. No. I know that was a bad one. I almost feel bad for doing it. Yeah. I'll delete it. There you go. Uh, but yeah, like Robin Williams and Jim Carrey, and then Jim Carrey says that when you go through stuff, it leads you to understand that you need Christ. You know, and there's a lot of people that are coming open about their faith in Jesus. I can't believe um, Jason, was it Bieber or whatever his name is, the singer, Justin. Yeah, he got supposedly got saved. I'm always questioning the Hollywood conversions because so often they're just for show. But I think he's genuine. I've seen him quite a bit talk about his faith and what he does now in his concerts. But rags to riches. Did you ever see the movie? It was a shirt. Well, you probably didn't see it because it was a Shirley Temple movie, and that's even before my time. That's how old that is. It was like my mom's time. But Shirley Temple, but it was remade by a Christian movie company. And it was called I can't remember anything anymore. I think it was called The Princess or something. But anyway, the storyline was this little girl was raised by her father who was very wealthy, but he was always traveling and he lived in, I think it was India, but she was taken to she had to go stay in a boarding school and it was in England or something. And the women that ran the boarding school were found out that she was a like a her father was like a prince or something. I don't think he was a king, but he was pretty high dignitary, and she was you know something too of that order, very wealthy. Well, they got jealous of her, so they basically kind of like a Cinderella story. They put her in the worst bunking situation. They made her clean all day long while other kids were learning and in school and outside playing. She had to clean the floors. I mean, it's just they treated her horrible. and her father they was writing to see how she was doing, and they were lying and saying, "Oh, she's doing great" and all this stuff. And hey, Game War, how you doing? So she ends up, you know, she can't write her father and tell her what's going on or anything. And her father's gone for an extended period of time. He was supposed to come back and couldn't or whatever. And so when he finally does come back, I don't know how, but he finds out what they have done to her. And boy, that was the end of that. He fixed it. He got her. He took her out of there, and I, it's one of those again. I can't quite remember all the story, but it's one of those stories where he realized that what they were doing, and I don't know if he did something with them. But anyway, can't remember all the story. But it was a good movie. I like to watch it every. I like the Christian one better than the Shirley Temple one because it's a much better story in my opinion than the two movies. But it was a good movie either way. Hey, I was telling Caleb about I might have a job. I'm waiting to see if they're going to hire me. I went through the interview process today. If they hire me, I'm probably going to be working at night. I don't think I'm going to work every day because they don't. I'm kind of on a floating rotation schedule right now with them when they need me. But I'm probably going to work a lot around the holidays, get a lot of hours, and then it might mellow out as it gets into the new year. But anyway, it's a perfect job for me. I'm hoping I get it, but I won't probably know till tomorrow or the next or Friday or maybe next week. So, but my plan is if I have to work every night of the week, I won't know. Sometimes I won't know my schedule till that day. So it's going to be really hard to plan anything. If I am around, I can let you guys know. We'll have service tonight, whatever. But we may just go to Saturday and Sunday. Now, Saturday we could do like an activity night on Discord, maybe try to grow Discord a little bit. And then Sunday we would just do the live stream. That may be, if I start working, it's probably going to be a lot harder for me to have the energy to come on here, to be honest. So I'm probably going to, whatever we got to do is right. Well, we got to keep it going. We just need to work around it. I mean, at this point, we don't have a lot going on as it is. I mean, the live stream is probably definitely worth saving. It's there's a lot there we could work with. I mean, we're starting to see. I wish it's hard because of that time of night. We're not getting as many people. If we could do it at a different time of night, it would be much better. 7, 8 o'clock would be much better, but it's hard to do it at that time. Um, but I think it's going to be hard to get people like Goldie. She's in Australia, 18-hour time difference. If we did it in the middle of the night, we could probably get her, but we're not going to do it in the middle of the night, so that's not going to work. But there's nothing you can do. You can't help 18-hour time difference. There's nothing you can do about that. Same thing with we've had some really good people that would if they were in the United States, they would be here every Sunday night. There's people that we have right now on Discord that couldn't come to the live streams because when we were doing it, it was 4 o'clock in the morning where they were at. understand that it's not easy to try to make this ministry work. It's a very hard ministry because, if you have a church, if I would have been doing this in a church for all these years, I'd have 1 million people. I mean, theoretically, not maybe 1 million, but I mean, because we would have had people in the area and they would have come in and we would have been able to disciple them and they would have stayed with us, hopefully, and we wouldn't have all this turnaround. But when you're online, it's just turnaround after turnaround. It's very hard to keep anything going, as you can see. It's kind of like I used to think of it like a lily pad, right? Chat rooms are like lily pads. Frogs jump from one lily pad to another, and that's just the way it is. It's very hard to keep anything going. This isn't new, what we're going through, with transition of people. This has been the norm since I've been doing this, and I knew it was going to be like this. And one time the Lord told me that this is like a landing, like a runway for an airplane. People fly in, they fill up, and they fly out. They're coming in, they're getting Jesus in their life, they're getting saved or whatever, and then they move on. And that's this ministry. And that's a hard thing because you don't get to reap the benefit of it. You don't get to see them grow up and become whatever they are. And I know there's people right now that got saved in Jesusconnect, went on to some church, and now they're being faithful, fruitful members of that church. I may never know that, but I know it's happened. I know it's happened because some people have come back and said that. But the unfortunate thing is, I don't get to see it. But I'm glad if they got saved. That's all that matters. I'm glad that they came to Jesus. And it's the same thing now. We might not see as many people, but anybody that comes, those people that are coming. That one girl, Tree Frog, I don't know her name. We should probably ask her name. I don't want to call her Frog. Hey, Frog! But that's her name on here. I don't know what they're called. Hey, Tree Frog. But she's a young person, and she's been coming almost every time we have a service. She's getting something from the Lord. That's real. That's not fake. But what's happened now is we're not. It's hard to take that anywhere because we only see them on that little bit of a time on a Sunday, and it's not really a good time to be interacting because I'm trying to do a service. And the thing is, it's not that I'm just doing it on Wire Club. It's that we're doing it on different sites, and there are people that see it on Facebook because I get comments. There's people that not very much on YouTube because we don't have a huge YouTube channel. Maybe someday we'll get that going. I watch these guys. I watch YouTube a lot. I like YouTube TV or YouTube. I mean, not YouTube. Well, YouTube TV, I have it, but YouTube, the channels. And I watch a lot of channels. I watch a lot of people's, I subscribe to them. I like watching that regular TV. It's just, and some of these guys, they just have these followings where, but they're like rebuilding cars and stuff. It's different than what we're doing. Or they build cabins out in the middle of nowhere, that kind of stuff. But they have a huge following, and they're on Instagram and they're on every social media platform. I noticed that they're not just on YouTube. And I've never ever taken advantage of social media ever. I've always just tried to do it alone without it. And had I probably would have done it over again, I would have tried to get a YouTube channel, tried to get more. I am using Facebook now more than I did before, and my Facebook channel group is actually grown a lot, and we get some people on my live streams from that. That was a real, again, little tiny grains of of wheat, that we're seeing that we don't ever talk about. But those are people, those are lives that God's touching. They may not be thousands of lives, but if it's one life, I always said, if it's one person that God brings out of darkness into light, that's worth it. Amen. One person. And we're seeing more than that, even with what little, but we got to put it all together. We got to put all that together in one Discord box and shake it up and make it happen. So that is exactly what every kid learned in preschool, how to draw a turkey. As did he really? What's funny is we have in my neighborhood. There's these wild turkeys, and they just run down the road, and they're actually, if you ever seen a wild turkey, they're huge birds, but they're not like I thought they would be. They're actually very beautiful. They're not like, all this what you see in the store. Well, what you see in the store is basically just the bird when it's been skinned and everything else, ready to eat. But when you see one in nature running around, they're they're quite um, exotic looking, I guess you would say. But watching them, just five or six of them, just going down the road, and I mean they're pretty smart. They know like if cars coming to get off the road, they don't hold traffic up. But they're just very interesting. And the fact that where do they come from? Why are there so many wild turkeys in that area? I don't get it, but there are. And I keep thinking to myself, do they even know it's Thanksgiving? Like, I wonder if they know. This is my favorite one. And the meme, the lady goes, "That's not your family. Don't worry." Oh, I got to tell you guys this. I didn't share this one yet. My life's an action movie. Did I ever tell you that? It is. I was coming out of the bank, and there was a curb. It's in a department store parking lot. And I'm walking out from the curb, and this lady comes right at me. I mean, literally, I was like here, and she's like, and I'm like, and she doesn't stop. I had to literally jump out of the way, or she would have hit me. It was that close. And there was a lady that was parked in front of me, and she was in a minivan, and she goes, "Well, whoa!" She goes, "She didn't even try to stop." She goes, "She just went around me," and I'm like, so I was mad. I chased her down, and she parked in the parking lot. She had her window rolled up, and I said, "What's the matter with you? You almost hit me." And she goes, like, I'm sorry." And I was like, I said, "You need to learn how to drive." I hate that parking lot. I absolutely hate it. People are crazy in there. They drive crazy. But I literally almost got hit by a car. I told you the devil was gunning for me. But I don't know, man. God was with me because I don't know how I had the time to even get out of the way. Man, that was crazy. I don't believe it, stuff like that happens. But anyway, Nothing happened. That was the main thing. Put the parking brake on. Oh man. I always say it's turned into Mad Max Thunderdome out there. People are nuts the way they drive. They're gunning for you. There's no patience in the world. People are just. It's like the movie The Crazies, except it's real life. People are crazy. They're coming for you. I was in the store today and I made a conscious effort that I was going to be polite to people. And this guy was, he's an old guy. I say old, I'm old. No, he was a lot older than me. He's going along like this, like, and I stopped and I went like this so he could go by me. And he just gave me a dirty look and I went, "What's wrong with you?" I kept thinking to myself. And, I was trying to be polite. Usually when people are, when you're trying to get one person's going this way and you're going this way, one of you is going to give in. So I just said, I'm going to give in. I'm going to let that person go. And they're waving and thanking me. And I'm trying to be nice. Then I go in the store and this old codger gives me a dirty look because I tried to let him go by me. I'm like, what about that did I do that made you upset? And it's just people are so triggered nowadays. You wonder about them, like I remember this one guy. I was at I was at Meyer. I wasn't at Kroger. I was at Meyer, and he was sitting there, and the lady was, they have these when you go through the self checkout, they have people that are there to help you when something happens and the little light goes off, and they have to go over and clear the register or whatever. And this guy goes, "Well, she's the rude one." Just like that. She's the rude one. And I'm walking by and I'm listening to this guy. And the lady's like right there, and I know she can hear him. And he's just like going off on her. I'm like, "So what do you do? Sit home all day and watch TV? Got nothing better to do than come to Myers and give these people a hard time, and they make, just above minimum wage to take care of cranky people like you." And I'm thinking to myself, you don't got nothing better to do than to hassle these people? And it just made me mad. I was almost said something to him, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. But it really does say something about the culture that we live in today. That we have people. I don't know how it is where you're at, but that's how it is up here. It may not be that way where you live, and if it's not, thank God for it. But it is here. People are just rude. They don't care. And it gets to a point where I do think that mental illness is probably the number one problem in our country. People are mentally sick. They're ill. They're mentally sick. No, that's not good. They are. They're deranged. And this is the problem because people don't know how to deal. Well, just look at Rosie O'Donnell. At first she's talking about Trump like if he gets elected president, she's going to move out of the country. She's still here. She's still making those squirrel videos where she's talking to the squirrels. She's literally gone off the deep end. And it goes to what I was saying earlier on in this time is that when you don't have the Lord, you don't have anything to go to help you. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with liking squirrels. Somebody put a video up of a squirrel on top of her head. But Rosie O'Donnell, God help her, she's really gone off the deep end. And these people that hated Trump so bad, but they thought Kamala was going to win, now they're just deranged even more. Now they're just, it's insanity upon insanity. And they're trying to figure it all out. How did we lose so bad? Oh, because you didn't listen. No, squirrels are the worst. They tease my dog. My dog literally all day long. They get on that. What they do, it's no joke. No joke. That's Joe Biden. No joke. No joke. This is what they do. No joke. I'm serious. that's what that's what my dog sees. That is exactly what my dog sees every day. These squirrels will get, they'll wait till he gets 2 steps from it and they'll go climb right up the tree. And then they get about halfway up and they go like this and they do that kind of stuff right at my dog. And my dog is going crazy. He's trying to get him. And I'm like, stop it. I said, you should know by now they're faster than you. You can't catch them. They're just teasing you. And it's like, he's so tricky. Exactly. Just like that. That's exact. I'm serious too. You think I'm joking? That's what these squirrels do. They get on the tree and they go like that. And he knows it. And he's crazy about it. And he wants to get them. And he would too. If he ever got one, that'd be the end of it. And he'll just run too, you know. And I got him on the leash, the short leash. And I know what he's going to do, so I'm prepared. But he literally just jolts right for him. When I'm on the 18-foot, he doesn't really mess with him too much. He'll see him, he just ignores him. But when he's on that short leash, like the short bus, you know, the short bus. I didn't think about that. Sorry, no offense to anyone, but when he's on the short bus leash, he just boom, he really gets going. But they do tease them. Squirrels, that is no joke. They literally tease them, and they do make a noise too. Have you ever heard a squirrel make that noise? You should Google it. They make a teasing, taunting noise, and they do that to dogs, cats. Probably, but I don't know. Well, ask Rosie O'Donnell; she'll tell you all about it. You know who else was really into squirrels was Bob Ross, the painter. He would rescue baby squirrels, and then he'd bring them into the studio, and they'd be climbing at his hair. You know, he had that giant, a giant mess of hair. He'd have a squirrel on top of his head. Oh man, it was hilarious. Yep, he loved them. All right, he was crazy for them. I don't dislike squirrels. I'm probably the squirrel's best friend they ever had because if it wasn't for me, my dog would have probably killed about 20 of them. Because they've gotten to the point where they're bold. They were literally, they won't move if he's walking and they're eating something on the ground. Until he, they'll wait until he's like, oh, good for him. I'm glad he hunted him. Some people eat them. I've never ate one, but some people do. But anyway, they're I remember when I was in Lafayette, Louisiana, I had relatives that lived there, and I went to visit them. I don't know if they were joking or if they were telling me the truth, but they said they were having possum for dinner. And they wanted to know if I wanted to stay for dinner, and I'm like, no, I think we gotta go. I never ate possum a day in my life. Have you ever ate possum? Not me. Never. I didn't even know you could eat it. It's like a rodent. My dog had one day out in the backyard, and he was twirling it around like it was a stuffed animal. I went out in the backyard. I saw this long tail looking thing, and he's got it, and he's twisting it around. And I look, and there's a possum in his mouth, and I got mad at him. I'm like, you let that possum go. And he's like, he gave me this real sheepish look, and he let it go, and then he kind of put his head down, walked away. He knew he was in trouble. So I grabbed it and took it and put it out behind the shed. The next day it was gone. It was playing possum. It was playing dead. It was alive. It was just playing dead. It literally, they just get stiff. And but that's their defense mechanism. They play dead, and then the animal thinks it's dead. He lets it go. There's no more fun. They don't want to eat it. They just want to kill it. Once it's dead, it's over. And that's what my dog did. And he would kill small things, cats, things like that huskies kill them. That's just in their nature. Sorry to say. Now, there are some cats down at the end of the road. Two strays that live in this yard. And one of them was in the tall grass this summer, and there was a fence there. And on the other side of the fence, my dog must have. No, wait, no, he was on the same side. He went in and he smelled it. He's got an unbelievable sense of smell. This dog, he can smell moles underneath the grass or the leaves. He can smell them, and he's quick too. He's like, whoosh. He got one day in his mouth, had it right in his mouth, and he carried it for a while, and then he dropped it and tried to bury it. It was still alive. I let it go, but he got into this situation where there was a cat in the tall grass, and he went in there after it, and that cat jumped about 6 feet in the air and took off. And I had him on the short leash, and he was like pulling me every which way, like. Grr, 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 grr. But the funny thing is, those two cats, they can be laying in the grass, and we'll walk, and he won't even. He'll just look at him. He won't even try to get him. He's gotten to a point now where he's kind of like. There was one of them. It's pretty friendly cat, I think. And he was laying in the driveway. It was the summer, and my dog was right there, and he just stopped and looked at him from the fence. And he just looked at the cat. He didn't try to get it or anything. I think he might be able to befriend that cat, but I wouldn't want to bet on it. So I don't. And the lady that lives there, I feel for her because her husband died during COVID. She's a widow. You know what's weird? The guy next to her, that lady's husband died during COVID too. Two houses next to each other, both husbands died, and both were widowed. And now the guy across the way there, three houses in a row, he just died of something, I don't know what, and now she's a widow. Isn't that crazy? Three on the same side of the street, one house right after the other. Man, that's crazy stuff. But I felt like I feel for her because she gets along pretty good. She's an older lady. She's probably, if I had to guess, I would say she's got to be 85. She goes out and feeds the birds and the squirrels. She has two cats that just stay out, the ones that I was talking about. If I ever see her, I always try to talk to her, and I'm going to tell her next time I see her. If she ever needs anything, let me know. I'd help her out in a minute. And I don't think her kids come around that much. I hardly ever see any. I do occasionally see somebody there. Now, the guy that just died, he used to sit out in his backyard when I would go into the ball field park right there in my neighborhood, there's a baseball field, and he lived right there, and we would talk. He was a nice guy. I'd always talk to him, and big sports fan. We'd always talk about sports and stuff. But anyway, he had this little dog. He'd run around in the backyard, and it's just odd that all of a sudden, I last time I saw him, I looked at him. He did not look good. I knew there was something wrong with him, and then of course I found out he died. But she's a widow, but she has a son that has come to stay with her, and the other lady, she moved out of that house, and the new family moved in. So there's the two widows that live next to each other now. But the one widow has a son, so I don't feel it's bad for her because at least she has somebody helping her, and I think she has more people coming around her. I just feel bad for that old lady. I don't know. I think about my mom, how she was, and but I mean, this lady seems to get around pretty good. Anyway, that's the story of my neighborhood. Like you guys really care about that, I'm sure. Anyway, well, we managed to talk about a lot of different things tonight, and we didn't get anywhere. So how about that? No, just kidding. Well, tomorrow's Wednesday. Oh, you're right. Your nephew. That how's he doing? Is he learning karate? Maybe he'll karate chop you. Does he try karate on you? Oh man, remember when Kramer got beat up by all those kids in that one episode? He was taking karate, and Jerry's like, "Oh, you're a black belt?" He goes, "Yeah," and he found out that he was fighting children, and he kept beating them up, and so they all took all their vengeance out on him one day. He was out in the alley, and it was dark, and all of a sudden he looks, and all these kids are standing there, and he's trying to climb up a ladder, and they're pulling him down, and they're that was awesome. Ah, Kramer, you gotta love that. Maybe that. Just be careful, man. You learn karate, he'll be flipping you around. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, well, tomorrow's Wednesday. I guess there's a show now with him in it about the karate stuff, Kumbah High or something. I don't know what it's called. I never saw it. Wax on, wax off. That was classic. You know that movie came out in 1984. That was the year I got saved. It was that summer, and I remember watching that movie at the movie theater. It's one of my memories of my new life in Christ. Not that that had anything to do with Christ, but it was just because it was when I got saved. I remember that. Karate Kid. So tomorrow we'll get together, maybe do some worship, and then Thursday I probably won't be on. It's Thanksgiving, so then maybe we'll come together on Friday. So tomorrow I'll let you know if I have that job or whatever.